Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to be going over the July 1st change to septic inspection regulations. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to share my screen and we're going to go to see what Virginia Association of Realtors has to say on the matter, because I try very hard to look to VAR to interpret these new laws for us. Let's share my screen and let you guys go with me to the VAR site. All right. So you are welcome to visit the Virginia Association of Realtors website anytime. If you are on our Wainwright Facebook group page, that's for agents only, you'll see that I am constantly sharing webinars, sharing legal updates from the Virginia Association of Realtors. The economics advisor there, the attorney there, the lead attorney there, they are constantly making Zoom videos that are incredibly informative. Here is a tab right here, what you need to know in 2020. So this was all about the new laws that were coming out. And they even came up with a PDF that you can download for the new laws of 2020 summary. They put that out a while back and I shared that with you guys. Today, last night when I was putting together this agenda, what I did is I just went and searched in the search field here for septic. And when I got the search results, the very first post was update on requirements to perform septic inspections. So it's sorted in a very timely manner. And here is what I pasted into our agenda for today. And it's in reference to House Bill 1266 regarding the qualifications of septic inspectors. Well, they made this new requirement and they didn't, unfortunately, they made it ahead of any sort of organization of how you can tell if your septic inspector has the qualifications or not. So there is a map that they're sharing so that you can look at the type of license you're looking for. And if I click that link and I go to the map, it'll let you look here in your area for an installer or a hauler or an operator or a well driller. So this is for sewage and well, and you can zoom in, go to your area, and you can look for providers who are performing work in your area. And then you can sort by the type of inspector you're looking for or type of vendor you're looking for. So here we're looking for, and here's Western Virginia Water Authority Water Quality Laboratory. Now, additionally on this VAR site, which I apparently just completely went out of, bear with me. When I go back to that article by Laura Farley, and she's the lead counsel for the Virginia Association of Realtors, she has a link to the House bill, so you can read more about the House bill that came through regarding septic inspectors and their qualifications. But you also can go to the Virginia Department of Health, to their website, and I'll click that link now so we can all take a look at that. And it goes over what has changed. It shares with you again the link to look up operators, drillers, labs, and then it has a link at the bottom for how do I get added to the list. So if you have a vendor reach out to you and say, hey, what's this all about? You can direct them to this page, because the general public can go to this page and they can click there and register themselves with the Virginia Department of Health and register themselves so that they end up on the map so that people can find them. Now, this is the summary here, that applications for on-site sewage systems and private wells had to be accompanied by a private sector consultant. Well, there are different qualifications for those. And a lot of our inspections, our septic inspections, were being done just as a simple walk across the yard. They run dye down all of the toilets and the sinks, and then they walk across the yard and look for any dye seeping up. Instead, some of the septic inspections now are going to require actually accessing the septic tank itself, looking at all the parts and making sure that they're all working properly. So because of that, a lot of the septic inspectors we were using weren't actually qualified to do that more thorough inspection. So in this case, what the House bill is saying is that in order to use the title of being an accredited septic system inspector in connection with a real estate transaction, now they can go out and do anything they want for somebody who's not selling their house. But if they want to use that term in a real estate transaction, then it's going to require them to have a high school diploma, have at least 1 year of active field experience conducting on-site septic inspections, or the completion of a nationally approved training course. And there are penalties associated with this, which is what scared a lot of people away from doing these inspections until they figured out what the law really meant, what was really going to be required, and waiting to see what was going to happen with violations. So, you know, my septic inspector just stopped doing them for the time being. I know Hall Septic is still performing these and is apparently qualified to do so, but they are backed up now because they have so many people requesting their services. And I had them doing one on a transaction I was completing a couple of weeks ago, and it took them almost 3 weeks to get out there. So you can imagine, had we not called very quickly to try to get on the on their list, it might have delayed closing. So something to consider. Now, we're still waiting for more information from the Virginia Association of Realtors giving advisement as to what type of inspection now is required to accompany our actual purchase agreement. That has not been said yet. So anybody have any questions about that so far? I'll be bringing you more information as it comes. Question?
I have a question.
Please.
And I may have missed it because I was answering something else a minute ago. Where did you see what the new requirements are going to be? Because I know it was originally just the walkover inspection. So was that on there, or is that just word of mouth?
That was not on there. I think where the confusion is coming is that if you want to use that term, you have to have had a nationally accredited company qualify you. And I think a lot of these septic inspectors, much like the home inspectors, were not licensed through DPOR until last year. Same with the septic inspectors. You could just be a septic inspector. So now they're having to make sure that they have completed some sort of national training program to be able to use the term septic inspector. So go ahead.
So I'm asking like what they're going to do for the inspection.
Right. Why you feel like the inspection has been changed. That's something.
Or what the guidelines are. Like, is that spelled out somewhere?
Not that I have seen yet.
Okay.
With this came the rumor that all the septic inspections were going to go to the fully inspected, inspect all the parts inspection. And I've not seen that yet as to who is saying that. Our standard forms are certainly not reflecting that. But our standard form and our inspection addendum has never detailed exactly what the septic inspection has to be. So tradition and local customs is what has dictated what type of septic inspection we have and who pays for that. So we have not seen any guidance on that yet as to what has changed that. And this is what's frustrating when these laws change and we aren't given a lot of warning. You know, we're not able to, you know, adjust as quickly as we would like to. Same thing happened with home inspectors having to be licensed through the state of Virginia, through DPOR. That took a lot of home inspectors by surprise. So several had already started the process, but many didn't know that was happening until right up until time. So I'm still looking for the Virginia Association of Realtors to give us more guidance on what that septic inspection should be. I will say there is talk at our local association about the septic disclosures And what we're requiring on the MLS is oftentimes requiring more of a disclosure from the seller than is required by law. So in the state of Virginia, it's very restrictive as to what disclosures the seller is required to disclose. And by having the seller disclose whether or not there's a septic system, which is fine, but having them go on to disclose what type of septic, is it a 3-bedroom, is it a 2-bedroom? Do we not know? Is there a permit available? Is there a permit unavailable? That is actually over disclosing on the seller's part. And we're doing it as a convenience to the buyer and the buyer's agent. But unfortunately, we're seeing lawsuits come out of that where the disclosure is done incorrectly. And then there's some confusion later about the septic system. And I think a lot of the blame on that falls on the local municipalities and how they have organized and made available the permits. You know, if you've ever gone and done a Freedom of Information Act request for a septic permit, you'll understand that it is sometimes very difficult to get to the permit. Sometimes it's filed by the original owner's last name. Sometimes it's filed by the developer's last name. Sometimes it's by the address. So it's very frustrating to try to find it. And there has been a project in place for several years across the entire state of Virginia, trying to create a database throughout these municipalities where they can file the septic permits under some standardized information, which would make everybody's lives so much easier. So if we were able to have those included on our CRS tax data search, you know, if they can integrate that new database into our CRS tax data search, then we really have everything we need right there online. Now, I don't know how quickly that's going to come to us, because I've been hearing talk of it for a couple of years now, and it's a project that's being pushed across the whole state, but it's just taking a very long time to figure out how are we going to standardize those the filing criteria. How are we going to, where are we going to host it? Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to be in charge of it? It would be a great resource for all the municipalities, but it's just not happened yet. I think once that happens, it'll alleviate a lot of the liability the seller has when trying to disclose up front what type of septic tank they have, or whether a permit exists or not. Because what happens is, if I go look for the permit as the listing agent and I'm told there is not one because I looked it up a certain way and I put on the MLS input sheet that the permit is unavailable, and then lo and behold, it turns up a year later, I don't know what kind of liability I have there when I said the permit was unavailable. So same with any time you're making a misrepresentation by saying it's a 3-bedroom septic tank and later you find out it's really a 2-bedroom septic tank. There's definitely liability there. So as a real estate agent, I would really prefer as a listing agent to not disclose that. So Brokers Council has been talking about that for probably the better part of a year now. And Board of Directors has just started talking about it, and we're going to see if a change is necessary on our MLS input sheet to minimize the risk to the sellers. So we'll see what happens with that. I personally am a fan of just, is there a septic system? Yes, no, right? And as a listing agent, my due diligence will be requesting the permit. And when I get the permit, I'm going to upload it under documents. If I do not get the permit because it's unavailable or I can't find it or I haven't gone to get it, then I'm just not going to upload the document, nor am I going to state what type of septic system it has, because I don't know, because I don't have the permit. I am never comfortable disclosing what type of septic system is on my property unless I am looking at the permit. And in that case, I probably still don't want to say something like 3-bedroom septic, because that means I'm interpreting those permits. And if you've ever looked at those permits, they can be very confusing to try to discern out of that what numbers of bedroom that septic system is. So that's just my 2 cents about minimizing liability to myself, my firm, and my seller. Anybody have any questions about any of that? I know I gave you incomplete information, but it's what I've got so far. All right. Well, I was talking about that to my family last night, and I think they roundly agreed that I have a very boring job. Okay, let's move on, shall we, to due diligence contracts. So we're seeing more and more due diligence contracts. That is very common when we get into what we call a seller's market, where there are not enough houses and way too many buyers. So anytime we get into a seller's market and we're looking at multiple offers, the buyer's agents are doing whatever they can to try to make their offer the least painful for the seller possible. So one technique in that is to do what's called a due diligence contract. And that's where the buyer says, hey, seller, you just kick back and relax and show up to closing. You don't have to do any inspections. You don't have to do any repairs. We're not going to ask for any repairs. We are just going to take a look at the house, have our inspection period, and they're going to let you know if we still want to go to closing or not. Now, what's attractive with this type of offer to the seller is the seller has no outlay of expense for inspections or repairs. And additionally, if they have requested not to see the inspection reports, the seller has no disclosure obligations from the discoveries made during those inspections, okay? So it does mean their house may go back on the market 10 days later, but typically this is also accompanied by a very strong financial offer as well. So when we're in a seller's market like this, the seller really gets to dictate what they want. And so during a due diligence period, the buyer pays for and performs all of the inspections they may wish to have. Now, those may still be indicated on an inspection addendum, or they may forego the inspection addendum and just do some additional language in the additional terms on the purchase agreement. But the way it works is they have a due diligence period. They have all their inspections and they decide if they still want to buy the house or not. And then during that period of time, they can say, you know what? We just found out that the furnace is past its life expectancy, even though it's working fine. The roof has about 2 years left on it. And we've decided we're going to go ahead and terminate. And then the seller puts it right back on the market. Now, the only downside to this is that the seller may suffer some days on the market there. And so now they're coming back on the market with 10 days on the market or 15 days on the market. However, a lot of times during the due diligence period, the buyer sees those reports and realizes, I still can't find anything else to buy, so I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with this one. What sometimes also happens, which is absolutely not written into our contract and not actually allowed, but we do it anyway, is at the tail end of that due diligence period, the buyer says, okay, I just found a whole lot of stuff wrong with the house, so I'm going to exercise my termination right. Unless, seller, you might opt to throw some money my way or reduce the price of the home. Now, the seller doesn't have to, and they can put their house back on the market. But sometimes they will go ahead and sort of off contract decide, okay, well, we will go ahead and renegotiate that purchase price and hang on to that buyer. And we didn't know that our furnace was, 10 years past its prime, or the roof only had 2 years left on it. So sure, we'll reduce the price. And sometimes instead they say, no thanks, and they terminate and they put it right back on the market. So there's actually nothing in our contract written in that can happen, but it does happen. So that's what we're seeing now, is a lot more due diligence contracts. On the agenda, it just says due diligence contract, call Ashley with a big exclamation point. This is important because if you've never written a due diligence contract before, it can be a little hairy and you need to make sure everything is in there. I got a call earlier this week where some of our agents had written a due diligence contract, and it appeared that they had written the due diligence language correctly, but unfortunately they had forgotten to write in what happens if the inspections are not to the buyer's satisfaction. So it did say it was contingent upon a due diligence period and it was contingent upon inspections, but it did not say if inspections are not satisfactory to the purchaser reserves the right to terminate the contract, receive a full refund of earnest money deposit, and not be named in default. So it sort of had the, if this happens, but it didn't have the what would happen if that did happen. So it's important to make sure you've got the language written fully locked down, fully exhausting any outcome that could happen. And that way everybody's expectations are the same. Now that worked out fine, and the buyer did opt to terminate, and the seller did say, okay. I think if they'd read that language a little harder, they might not have let our buyer go, but I'm thrilled they did. So one thing I'll tell you is I've already crafted that language for you. So if you do decide to do a due diligence contract and you're in our purchase agreement on zip forms, right above the field, you'll see a little piece of like a little pencil, and you can click on that, and then you can click on the little piece of parchment paper and go to broker clauses. And under the header for purchase agreement clauses, you'll find a due diligence language there, and you can just insert that into the additional terms on the purchase agreement. Now, it does require a few other steps. I want you to strike clause 17, which includes the repair remediation limit. I want you to get rid of the inspection addendum. So just call me if you plan on doing a due diligence contract. And Kelly, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, since you are a broker here and a broker in Arizona, does Arizona see much of the due diligence contractor? Is that just what we've got going on here?
What we call that is waiving the inspection period. And yeah, we're doing that. We don't have other contracts or anything like that. We just put 0 inspection. Arizona, of course, is a disclosure state. So sellers have to disclose everything up front. And so we get our 10-day inspection, and at any time the buyer can back out for any reason on that 10-day, all the time. That's not just during this time. So this is totally different for our end.
Love to go to that.
Yeah. And so we're, you know, 10-day inspection period. The idea is you're not going in just to looky-loo, but you're going in with intent to stay, but a buyer can get out in for any reason within the first 10 days of their inspection, and everything goes back as it is. And
is there
moving
an
on.
additional fee for doing that they would potentially lose if they back out? See, North Carolina is a due diligence state, so their contracts are written as a due diligence period, but there's an earnest money deposit and a due diligence fee. And if you back out, you lose that due diligence fee. And you can imagine during a seller's market, the seller might negotiate that due diligence fee to be higher because they don't have to take their house off the market for 10 days to let you looky-loo. There may be someone during this market who might just buy it as is, you know, without inspections. So you would lose that, you would be refunded your earnest money deposit, but you may lose your due diligence fee if you decide to terminate.
Yeah, and right now, because of our shortage in Phoenix, and the market is so hot, there's very few looky-loos in the aspect. I mean, we had one cancel yesterday because the seller was unwilling to do a repair, which was really light, but the buyer's like, you know, I'm not going to do it, so I'm walking. So, and that was their right. But in the seller's market, I mean, I had a list given to me the other day, a long list of repairs, and we do it differently, repairs, than you guys here. But we said, here's $1,500, take it or leave it. We got 3 other people waiting, so take your pick. And they're like, we'll take it. I'm like, good job, moving on. So yeah.
Listen, everybody's grumpy right now. There's no ungrumpy transaction right now.
Yeah, but we're averaging about 11 offers on every transaction.
See, I thought we had it bad here, like 4 or 5 every transaction, but
February I did 18 on one. And yeah. And the one that hit the record the other day in Phoenix, there were 63 offers on one property. Yeah.
Was it underpriced to begin with? Like, was the list price a teaser price, or was it fairly priced?
It's fairly priced. Yeah, I mean, well, Phoenix is the hottest market in the nation, and I mean, not only because it's 125 degrees, but because of the thing. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But yeah, I mean, we're waiting in line to get into homes. You might wait. The other day, one of my agents, like, Kelly, there was a showing every 5 minutes going in. So you walked in, and yeah, it's crazy.
So what do you tell your agents as far as when you're competing with that many offers to give them a leg up? Like, how do you stand apart when you have, 20 offers on a property?
Again, we're kind of different in the aspect. For instance, our inspection period's written into our contract is automatically 10 days. Then we give the buyer 5 days to decide if they'll do what we request. And then if they don't, it comes back to us for another 5 days for us to decide whether we can live with that. So great for us is we'll take that inspection due diligence time, which is really 20 days. We cut it down to 8. 5 days to inspect, 2 days for the seller to respond, and 1 day if we can live with that. That is huge because Donna might not be here in 20 days, but she's probably still hanging around in 8.
Yeah.
So that does it. We're unfortunately, we are seeing appraisal waivers or waiving the appraisal contingency. So we're changing it. Instead of just waiving it strictly, we're saying we'll waive it as long as the house appraises for the list price. So if it get that way, we can control how much money above we're going into that. We're also using an escalation clause to beat whatever's in. Yeah.
Sounds exhausting, Kelly.
Well, we're also doing like we won't, because again, one of the things you guys do, we do really good here is the fact that some of the repairs are negotiated in the contract toward the Benzer. We don't do any of that in Arizona. So one of the other things we're doing is we're saying we won't ask for any repair that doesn't retail for at least $500 per trade. So we won't ask for any roof repairs unless a roofer needs to spend $500 somewhere on the roof, then we'll do it. That way the seller knows we're not going to nickel and dime them to death.
I do like that because having an electrician come out to do one tiny piddly thing, it's very frustrating for,
Right. So we do per trade. So we might do 500, maybe do 1,000 per trade. So that way the seller knows we're not going to come in, because again, we don't negotiate any repairs up front, no money, no nothing in ours. So a lot of agents do like to try to renegotiate the whole contract when it comes to that Benzer or our response to the due diligence. And so that way we put that ahead, that they know that they're not going to be, we're going to only ask for big items, not the little pitty stuff.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. There are lots of ways I would change the way we do it here. It's just things are very slow to change, obviously.
Oh, well, did I mention slow? Very slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, our sellers disclose everything inside the 4 corners up front.
How do you see that? Like, how does that actually happen? Do they have a home inspection and before they even put it on the market?
Nope. We have what we call the seller's property disclosure statement. It's 7 pages, and it's just reminding people what a material fact is. Have you had any roof problems? When do you have a roof warranty? Have you had any leaks in your plumbing? What's the plumbing issue? Do you know your kind of pipes? Do you have septic? Are you on? It's just 7 pages. It's really, I can't imagine why anybody in the country wouldn't do it, because coming out of Arizona, all homes have history.
Sure.
And why wouldn't you just, who knows better of that home than the person that has lived in it? So why you would not disclose something and just say, this is, and coming here and not having any, and like, and the houses are built in 1800. I mean, the other day I sold a house for the 2nd time, and we had 3 SPDS, which means 3 sellers disclosures, which means I covered my seller because I've sold it 3 times. We had all the SPDS. Now we're only required to give the one that the seller currently has, but I'm like, we can disclose all the way back. We're covering it. And they still were like, well, explain this. It's like, dude, I just gave you 3 SPDS that unlocks the whole world for you. Good luck with that, But yeah, do you have infestations of pigeons or, rat, because we have roof rats and things like that in Phoenix. So it's really not a bad form, but you guys here just want nothing to do with it.
No, I know.
I understand.
I know. And every seller wants to act like, nope, my house is perfect. Nope, never had anything wrong with it.
Yep.
very odd that we do it that way, but I don't see that ever changing. I don't ever see us flipping to a disclosure state.
Well, some of the other parts of Virginia are doing it, correct? My understanding is Virginia Beach now is Hampton Roads or whatever is doing where they give a due diligent period, and
yes, I do see us going to becoming a due diligence contract at some point. I just don't see us becoming a disclosure state where sellers are required to disclose rather than a non-disclosure.
See, that's just crazy. I mean, we go to the doctor and we disclose what we've done in the past to our bodies. Why wouldn't we disclose to the house?
I mean, we have Carfax here in Virginia, but
exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
That's where you bump your head against. We are a really, really old state. So,
well, yeah, original. You're an original. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, that's amazing that we don't. And what amazes me more is that we as the agent here in Virginia have to disclose it if we find out about it, but the owner doesn't have to disclose it.
That's correct. Listing agents have a higher level of disclosure obligation than the seller. That part is crazy.
And how that passed, if you can explain how anybody passed that and you guys allowed that to be passed, I want to know.
I thought, it's my perception that was a National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics situation, which of course is national, and
right.
Doesn't quite line up with our state being a non-disclosure state. But
yeah. So.
Oh, poor Edna's been waiting to get in. Oops, sorry everybody. Okay, so we're going to move on to just a quick update about the lockbox exchange. Edna, welcome. I'm so sorry that you were not in the call. My apologies.
I'm sorry, I didn't see her waiting.
No, I clicked to admit her earlier and then it must not have taken. So apologies, Edna. We're glad you're here. So we're going to talk briefly about the lockbox exchange. So you know our super boxes are starting to get a little bit of age on them, and it is time to go ahead and update those. The last time we did a lockbox exchange was many years ago. I can bring you a little bit of news. It is happening. It is happening hopefully this summer. Coronavirus has put kind of a delay on it, only because the mother company of Supra has some very strict COVID regulations, and that is of course trickling down to Supra and how they would be able to conduct a lockbox exchange. So it is happening. We're excited that it's happening. We anticipate that it'll be like the last time, where it is just a one-for-one exchange, where it won't actually cost you any money to exchange your lockboxes. There are going to be several days during which the lockbox exchange will happen. And I can tell you that everyone at RVAR is working diligently to figure out how to do it quickly and easily and with as little heartburn as possible during the days of the exchange. They also have made accommodations for agents who may own a very large number of lockboxes. So there are agents in town who own 50 or 60 or 70 lockboxes. Now, sometimes that's a broker who wants to own all their lockboxes and loan them out to their agents, but they've made an accommodation for that, where Super will just drop ship new lockboxes to that broker without them even having to attend the lockbox exchange. So I thought that was a very clever solution.
Ashley?
Yes.
Can I jump in here? I put this in the chat box, but RVAR sent out an email on the 20th. It's going to be August 3rd through the 6th.
Awesome. Thank you. I sometimes forget what I hear in board of directors and what I read on like the dashboard or something, and I have to be careful not to talk too much about what we talk about at the board of directors. So thank you for reminding me that that is available information. So awesome. So August 3rd through 6th. And Stevie's also saying, can we do a contest on when we are going to go under 1,000 listings? Oh God, I hope we do.
Can we take bets?
You know, we have.
I know it's going to be under 1,000 today, because both Lori and I are going to have pending contracts, so it's probably going to do it today.
Your fault, Stevie. If you weren't so good at your job, we'd have more.
Hey, celebrate me selling my father-in-law's house, okay?
Yay, that's wonderful. Good.
Yay.
So yes, we have 1,300 real estate agents and only 1,001 listings. So that is not good. Not good. And yet Nanad still thinks, yep, gonna get into real estate, gonna kill it.
It's a great life.
It is.
Until you're working with a nurse or a doctor and they have this crazy 12-hour shift that they can't go see houses and they're all gone before they can go see them.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. I've got a warehouse worker, and by the time she gets off work at 6 o'clock, she'll have texted me 2 or 3 houses that day and they're gone. I mean, it's very frustrating. Yeah, but it will not always be like this, Nanad, I promise.
That's right.
No, it'll go back to the other way where you can't sell anything for a couple of years.
Yes.
Yeah. 20 years in the business, so I'm a little, yeah. And I'm a broker because I'm broker than most. So yeah.
Okay, so mark your calendars for August 3rd through 6th. We're going to be having a lockbox exchange. You got to rustle up your lockboxes. This is always a painful time for me because this is when I really realize how many lockboxes I have lost, don't know where they are, disappeared, have walked off of stoops. So
you should see Donna's desk this morning. It's covered in blue lockboxes.
Yay, getting a jump on, getting organized for that. Thank you, Donna.
So
Okay.
actually the key is still, our current keys are still working on the new ones, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
they are. And that will still be the app you use. Board of Directors approved just renewing or signing a new contract with Supra. So we're not changing firms. So it'll still be the same provider. So your app should still work. Everything should still work fine.
Kelly, yours is on your phone, correct?
I'm sorry?
You have the app on your phone, Kelly?
Yes, ma'am.
Video.
Yeah, and I switch back. It's the same one we use in Phoenix. So I just have to call and have them switch me over when I'm in town. Yeah.
So it is also the same lockbox that Lynchburg Association of Realtors uses. So these lockboxes can work with each other with permission. However, that's not going to really be necessary anymore because the most exciting news on this lockbox exchange is that the new lockbox will allow one-day showing codes. So we're thrilled with that. That means if I want to go show a property out, if an agent outside of our area wants to come in and show my listing, I'm going to go on DPOR. I'm going to verify they are an actual real estate agent with an active license. Okay, don't just trust when somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I'm such and such, and I'm a realtor outside of the area." Go look them up, and then find their phone number and make sure that phone number matches because you're giving them a lockbox code to get into your seller's house. But now we're able to do that. We're going to be able to issue a one-day code, and you can restrict it to a certain number of hours. It can be for a vendor. If you want to let the radon person stop by to pick up the radon test, you can make that access for 1 hour. And the way that's going to work is that whoever needs to get a one-day showing code is going to have the Supra app on their phone. And they will be a registered user, and it will be tied to the identifying information on their phone. And so you will always know who has been in there. So if somebody goes in there that's not supposed to go in there, they're going to be able to track that app access back to a certain phone and therefore presumably a cell phone number. So it's much more secure than just issuing a random one-day code that you're going to key into a keypad. New River Valley has Central Lock, and that is a keypad, and you send a one-day code, and it is literally just a 5-digit code that anybody who has it can go type that on the keypad and go inside the house. So I like this version better. It is more secure. You do have a record of who's been in there. You do have a record of who used that code. And that code is sent just to that app on that phone. It can't be shared with other people. So I'm thrilled with that. That's going to make life much easier with cooperating with outside brokers. So anybody have any questions about the lockbox exchange? We got a couple of minutes left for just roundtable or Q&A. I've got one more topic I'd love to touch on. But anybody?
You might have covered this, but I went to Tahiti for a minute. Will inspectors still not be able to get in with the lockboxes, or is that something that is changing too? Did I miss that?
Well, inspectors certainly can. Anyone who you give a one-day code to can access the home. However, unauthorized access is still against the rules. So as a buyer's agent, the listing agent who owns that lockbox, who is using that lockbox, is the only one that's going to be able to give the one-day code. So
Okay, so we can ask the listing agent if they can have the access to get the radon equipment, for instance.
that's exactly right. So,
Thank you.
So as a listing agent, I'm going to receive a notice from my buyer's agent that the radon person would like to go back and pick up the test. And would I please give that radon inspector or that home inspector a 1-day code as the listing agent to my lockbox on that property for X hours of day on X day. So that's why, you know, I do love it, because it is going to, you know, unauthorized access is still prohibited. So we can't just let anybody in the house without the listing agent's permission. We can't just take just anybody into the house. We are there with permission for a very specific purpose, you know? And so we're gonna have to still be very careful about making sure we have access and permission for access properly. But because, as Stevie pointed out, because the listing agent is the one generating that 1-day code, that is gonna protect us, that we're not actually physically able to give a code to a radon inspector as a buyer's agent, you know? So I think that's okay.
So Ashley, you guys we don't have CBS codes, and inspectors are becoming affiliates where they have their own key to get in?
That's how it used to be here, but that got taken away after some naughty business. So, so they no longer have that. So now the 1-day code would sort of open that up again. However, the listing agent is the only one who would be able to give out that 1-day code. So it's hard to argue that they had unauthorized access if it's the listing agent giving out the code, okay? Now, certainly hijinks can happen. Certainly someone can, you know, a buyer's agent can try to pull the wool over the listing agent's eyes about who they're giving the 1-day code to. However, that is going to be straight up, you know, code of ethics violations and be punished swiftly and appropriately. So I think we'll be able to keep control of authorized access, considering the listing agent is controlling that box. You're muted. Let me unmute you. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
I forget. One thing on the lockbox exchange, in that email, it does have time slots. So if you have lockboxes to exchange, either go to RVAR or look at that email so you can choose your time slot that you're going to go. They're trying to limit how many people are there at a certain time. So check that out before you head that direction.
I told them to hire a Chick-fil-A manager and just handle it like that.
That's right.
All day. Okay, last thing I want to touch on, and then if anybody has any questions, is if you have looked at the new version of the exclusive right to represent seller form, and I'm going to share my screen real quick and show it to you, even though I don't have it pulled up. Actually, let me talk and I'll pull it up and then I'll share my screen. So what has, oh, bear with me one moment. So what I have seen is we have added, we changed that form, and what we have added is a field having the seller give permission or not give permission to share information about closing costs the seller is paying on behalf of the buyer. So we have long griped that when we look at comparatives on the MLS, that we don't feel like we're getting the total picture. If we see that the house closed, well, not in this year, but in past years, when we have seen that a house is closed for more than list price, we have just had to make assumptions about closing costs being paid on behalf of the buyer. But we never actually knew without calling the agent how much that was. And appraisers obviously have seriously struggled with this. You know, they're using those comparatives to try to make market value assessments for appraisals that are required by the lender. And they're working at a disadvantage when they don't know if any of that purchase price reflects any closing costs. So you guys all know that you've received calls from appraisers asking you if there were any closing costs paid on behalf of the buyer. And sometimes we as real estate agents, we're good actors and we call those appraisers back and we look up our file and we give them that information. But during a hot market, sometimes we don't have time to do that. And so then those appraisers are flying blind on that comparative, or maybe can't even use that comparative because they don't know whether there were any closing costs paid for the buyer when that property went under contract. So in this case, we have added a field, and I'm going to show it to you here very briefly. and let you see that we are now going to be asking our seller, will they or will they not agree to allow us to disclose that information? Now, I had one of our agents reach out to me last night and say, hey, I assume you're going to touch on this. I would just love to know your opinion on what you're going to be recommending to your own sellers. And I'm going to tell you, until I see a problem arise, I am going to be recommending to my sellers that they disclose that information. It lets us have better comps. It lets me do a better job of determining what a list price in that neighborhood should be when I have a new listing. If I know in that area what the home's truly sold for. And they're being very specific about what we are reporting. We are reporting closing costs, and closing costs are defined on the standard provisions page of our purchase agreement. So there should not be any, it is not a jet ski, it is not a roof repair, it is not the seller buying a new HVAC unit. It is closing costs that we wrote in on the purchase agreement. Now, there was some argument back and, well, I won't say argument, but there was some debate back and forth about whether we are going to be recording on there what was written into the contract versus what actually happened at closing. Because as you have all experienced, it may be a case of where the seller and the buyer agree that the seller is going to pay $6,000 towards the buyer's closing costs. And then when we get to closing, they really only end up contributing $5,892. So there was some debate as to which of those figures should be recorded as we close out the file on the MLS. I am likely going to go with, and this can come down to your philosophical choice, I'm going to end up using what we wrote in that contract because, you know, that is what the seller and the buyer agreed was fair market value, and that is what they recorded on. The fact that they couldn't use up the last, you know, $12 or something of the closing costs is not going to make as much of a difference to me as what that seller and buyer agreed was fair market value at the time of writing that contract. Now, you may choose to do the other one because that is the actual closing costs paid, and that is totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let you see what this looks like. Did I do a good job looking like I was still talking to y'all while I was getting my way through zip forms? All right. So here we are on zip forms on the exclusive right to represent seller. And you'll see that in clause 12, nope, just kidding. Here we go. In clause 14, in additional authorizations, where we historically have always said, we're going to be allowed to put a for sale sign on the property. We're going to be allowed to put a lockbox on the property. We now have 14E. And 14E says the seller will disclose or not disclose seller paid financing concessions after settlement. If neither box is checked, the seller agrees that they will not disclose the closing costs. Now, I'll tell you where you may get some pushback on this is going to be new construction. They want that property to record at full list price or better, because they're going to continue to sell properties in that development, and they want to keep making sure that it appears that they always sell for full list price. I've done several new constructions in the past. They want that ticket price, and they want that ticket price recorded. So sometimes that can include closing costs. Sometimes that can be, we're only going to sell at list price, but hey, we'll throw in, you know, an extra 2 feet of decking on the back of the house, or we'll throw in, you know, some fencing, or we'll go ahead and do brick pavers on the path instead of poured concrete. They're going to make sure they get their value because it's in their best interest for future sales to make sure that they don't show any sort of dip down in sale price compared to list price on their properties. So in those cases, you're likely going to have a seller who is saying, nope, I refuse to disclose that we paid closing costs. Because obviously they want it to look like the house sold for a lot. You may also just have sellers who say, nope, I want it to look like my house sold for way more than it really did. And that is an ego thing, and that is okay too, because it is the seller's choice. It is always the seller's choice, okay? Anybody have any questions on that? Every time I'm like, how am I going to talk for an hour? And then I talk for an hour. So I appreciate all of y'all being here. We're going to have a new agent meeting here in just a couple of minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and sign off and wish you guys all a very happy Thursday. Thank you all for your input today.